Okay, we are live. We have with us Alexander McCurris in London. We have Alex from Reporterfy Media. You're joining us from China, correct, Alex?
That's correct, yeah, Chongqing, China.
China, wow. And we have Patrick, Mr. Patrick Lancaster, joining us from?
Donetsk.
Wow.
Donetsk.
All right, let's
Somewhere
get started.
that was Ukraine, but is now Russia.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes to an hour for this stream. We have about 30 minutes to an hour of Patrick's time. We have Alex joining us from China. I'm in Cyprus, Alexander's in London. Let's just get going, everybody. Hello to everyone that's watching us across all the platforms. Thank you very, very much to our awesome moderators. Guys, I have the links to Alex's YouTube channel as well as Patrick's YouTube channel in the description box down below. And at the end of the stream, I will add those links as a pinned comment as well. Please go follow, subscribe their channel, and follow their work. Alexander, let's get into this.
Well, I mean, I think we are unbelievably privileged today. Can I just say, Patrick requires no introductions, I'm sure, to most of our community. I consider Patrick to be the outstanding correspondent, at least Western correspondent, of the war that's being waged at the moment in Ukraine. And I say that bar none. I mean, and I'm going to add just one point. Not only does Patrick cover the war brilliantly from a military point of view, but he gives a humanity to what is happening in this war, which no one else does, and which for me personally is very important. There is a human side to this war. There's a tragic side to this war. If you go to Patrick's videos, it's there. And that's an essential part of war. And Alex, reportedly media, well, again, what can I say other than that outstanding reporter, person in, I think, a country which is going through extraordinary important times. I mean, we have a Congress going on there. Mr. Xi Jinping is now likely to become the continuing leader of China. Lots of things said about him, which I don't personally take much notice of in the Western media, but you can enlighten us on the truth. So we are incredibly privileged to have you both here. Now, I'm going to do one thing after these introductions. I'm going to go and shut that door. My dog is gone, and I don't want interruptions.
Okay, Patrick, let me just throw it to you because everyone, I'm sure, wants to know how are things where you are.
Well, thanks for having me here for one. Really enjoy being here with you guys today. And just to get right into it, obviously, a lot of people understand that things have gotten pretty hard, even harder than they have been in the city of Donetsk. I mean, people are dying every day here. And even across all of Donbass and the other two regions, Kherson and Zaporozhye. Of course, last week was the referendum where the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic and the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions held referendums to join Russia. And of course, as everyone expected in Donbass, the Donetsk Lugansk People's Republic, there was never any question there about what the people wanted. I mean, the people there are they are Russian, and there was never any guess on what the outcome would be. Just like there was no guess what the outcome would be in 2014 when they had their referendum to break away from Ukraine, which this 8-year war started after. But Russia accepted the results of these referendums, and as I said, in addition to the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, there was the Kherson and Zaporozhye. Now, if you've seen my reports from those areas, it's a bit more divided. It's not the same splits as in Lugansk and Donetsk, but I went to do reports in I started the reports for the referendums in Kherson, then moved to do 2 locations in Zaporozhye, both Melitopol and Berdiansk, and showed what was happening with the referendums there, and then moved to Mariupol and Donetsk. I couldn't quite make it to Lugansk for the last day, just because there was so much to cover. Luckily, it wasn't just a one-off day referendum like it was in 2014 when it was just one day, but they separated it into many days out of safety because they had these mobile voting stations where people didn't have to go to the centers of the city and really go far from their home, because all of these major cities just under constant shelling along the contact line. And it saved people's lives having these mobile stations. So the voting stations went to the people instead of the people having to go to the stations. And they still, of course, had that chance on the last day, the 27th. The 27th in the areas were the days that they set up the mobile state, or not the mobile station, but the actual polling stations in the schools, the post offices, and things like this. And the turnout was very good in all of the regions it's reported, and especially the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. And as was expected, the people voted for to join Russia. Now, only the people in the regions that were controlled by Russia at the time, as in the Russian R and DPR and Lugansk controlled territories of these regions, were able to vote. The people that are in the Ukrainian controlled territories, of course, aren't able to vote. And a lot of people say, well, on one hand, you say that the split was more, there's more of a split in the Zaporozhye and Kherson regions of how many people are for Ukraine and how many people are actually for joining Russia. Well, the fact is, many of the people that were for Ukraine left of these regions, just like they did from the Donetsk and Lugansk areas. And the ones that that stayed did not take part in these referendums because Ukraine advised them not to, and even implied that it would be breaking Ukrainian law to take part in these, just like they say that it's against Ukrainian law to accept Russian humanitarian aid. So Ukraine really tied the hands of the people, and Ukraine is the one that made it less of a democratic vote. Russia gave the chance, and the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic gave the chance for people to give their votes. Everything I witnessed, and the international observers that were in these areas witnessed, was people taking the ballots, being given the chance to go to a private area to mark whether they want to join Russia or not, and then folding the ballot and putting it in a box completely anonymously. There was no chance of repercussions on them from anyone I talked to, and anything I observed in all 3 of the 4 areas that were where these referendums were given. And back to the fact that since this referendum, even before, Russia said, if you continue to attack the areas that have the referendums after the referendums, this will be like attacking Russian territory. And they have still been attacking, and people have been dying every day. Just a 17-year-old boy died yesterday in Donetsk, and day before that, people died. Day before that, I was on the location where 3 people had died just hours before I was there. I spoke to a man whose father was killed and his uncle were killed in the same attack. There was 2 brothers and their friend that were killed. 3 people, 3 men that were killed by shelling just in their backyard. So that's the situation as far as off the top of my head.
Well, can I say, Patrick, thank you for that update and about that description of the referendums and about the violence that has been perpetrated against these people. You may not be aware of this, but we've had an extraordinary article appearing today in the British media, and it's in the Daily Mail, which is one of the most widely read newspapers here in Britain. In fact, perhaps the most influential. and its title is, and it's about what Ukrainians are doing. Its title, this is the Daily Mail writing, "We're hunting them down and shooting them like pigs. How the Ukrainians are taking brutal revenge on the collaborators who betrayed their neighbors and country to the Russians." And the article continues to describe these things quite vividly, talks about finding at least 29 cases of people who've been the victims of extrajudicial killings. What is extraordinary about the article is it writes about this with a quality of approval. So just as if you follow the Western media, you don't know very much about the shelling of Donetsk. When it happens, it's the Russians who get blamed. It's all turned round. These people in Donbass, they don't really exist from a Russian point of view, from a Western point of view. When they are murdered in this kind of fashion, well, I think you get a sense of the kind of article that people are being fed about this war in Britain. I found it extremely disturbing indeed. I found its cynicism and its callousness and its brutality really quite astonishing. Can I just ask, Patrick, moving on, lots of discussions about the war situation. Russia retreated from Krasny Liman. The Ukrainians have been trying to penetrate into the Lugansk region. They've been making some attempts there. So far, it doesn't seem to me from a distance as if they've achieved very much, but nonetheless, they're there. There's also been big events in Kherson region. What do people on the ground say? Are they, I mean, I'm sure they're aware of this. Does it make them nervous? Are they frightened? Do they think there's a chance that Ukraine may win? What are people thinking and saying at the moment?
It's for sure making people nervous. When this started in February, everyone, even myself, in fact, I made a statement. Well, today's the last day Donetsk is going to be a frontline city, because everyone thought, 3 days to Kiev and all that good nonsense. Didn't quite work out that way, as we know. And as you say, lately things have been going very strangely for the situation of who controls what territory. And yes, first, the Russian forces lost control of and left a lot of the areas they controlled in the Kharkov region, Izum, for instance, just weeks after I was in the city. And now, over the last weeks, there's been a reported 17 villages taken control of by Ukraine in the Kherson region. Of course, Liman, Krasny Liman. So things are definitely going in a different direction as they were. And yes, there are people that are evacuating some territories because they're afraid for what might happen if Ukraine takes control of the areas they're in. I personally know a person who evacuated part of his family from her son yesterday just for safety, because no one really knows what's happening right now. As far as the soldiers' point of view on what's happening, some of the local soldiers that I spoke to just day before yesterday when I was on the front line just outside of Ivka, they think everything is going to be okay. They just need to wait on the reinforcements and the mobilization of soldiers that are going to be coming very soon from Russia. The soldiers have a very high hopes and doesn't think this is really that big of a bump in the road, even though it is kind of a backpedal, you could say, literally. But there's a lot of unknown in Donbass, that's for sure, and especially Donetsk. There has been a lot of progress around Donetsk, but not as much as the people expected. And still, there's so much territory around Donetsk with the daily shelling. I think once Russia is able to take care of the daily shelling of Donetsk, that is going to be the moral turnaround, the morale turnaround for the people and for the fighting forces, the three different fighting forces that are in this. Because we have the Russian forces, we have the Donetsk People's Republic forces, and the Lugansk People's Republic forces. Now, soon, those are all going to be turning into one. Nobody knows exactly how this process is going to go. We're getting new news on that every hour, literally more than once an hour, on how this process is going and what's actually going to happen. But the fact is, right now, there's three different forces. They're working together. So in some places, they're actually physically in the same spot working together. In some places, they all have their own different jobs individually. So that's kind of the idea of the people. There's a lot unknown, but a lot of high hopes.
Can I just ask one very last question in this series? I mean, has there been any criticism of the Russian leadership? I mean, are people disappointed that this is taking as long as it has, and the fact that things have happened so slowly, and that there's still so much shelling and things of that going on?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people that are disappointed that this is not over and done with, but these people, they're Russian, and they know they have to count on Russia to take care of this, because they know that if Ukraine is able to take control of all of the Donbass again, it's the end of the line for them. So they're waiting for Russia to make the next move, make their next strategic move in this chess game, and just get this ball rolling, because for right now, Ukraine is making most of the advancements.
Yeah. Alex, can I just switch to you? Completely different situation in China at the moment. Everything seems extremely stable. Is it really stable? We had talk of a coup a few days ago. I didn't take that at all seriously. I mean, I thought the whole thing was absolutely preposterous. But what is the mood in China at the moment? And are people excited about the fact that the Congress is? I think it is the Congress of the party is on
National Congress.
I mean, the National Congress. I mean, are they excited about it? This is just part of the ordinary ebb and flow of life, or are people expecting big changes? Or is it going to be more of the same? I mean, what is your sense of the situation there at the moment?
Well, I'm quite close to the situation. I came to this country a year ago, and just to give your viewers a little bit of an understanding about myself, very good friends with Patrick Lancaster, traveled into some very interesting areas with Patrick. My hat is off to you, and I'm glad you're safe, my friend. And thank you to the other two Alexes for inviting us on the show today. Just to give you a clear answer for that, I retired about 20 some years ago. And after meeting Patrick and seeing what he was doing, documenting what could possibly be one of the largest archived I would say archived of videos that may be used in a tribunal in future years, said to me that, wow, okay, I have to do something in this space. And I was never on social media. I decided to start a channel, and I had this obsession with China, and I said, I have to go and follow this country. Now, I'm with a very large media group. I'm in one of the largest cities in China, Chongqing. 32 million people live here. A very key city when it comes to the October 16th meeting. Very, very crucial. Now, as we know how China operates here, China runs the long game, as you know. And Patrick, we might just want to mute your mic there for a sec. So China runs the long game. And are we going to be expecting any surprises. I rather doubt we're going to expect any surprises. I think we're going to see an announcement that has something to do with relaxing the restrictions coming into the country. But I'm going to be very, very clear with the audience here in regards to China. They are watching this situation with Russia very, very close. And they will analyze this probably over and over and over. And this really does, I think, have some effect on what's going to go on the 16th in the 5-year plan. Now, for the audience, this meeting is crucial for China. This is the decision of the central government, what they're going to do for the next 5 years, where the budget is going to be spent. And we are talking about astronomical numbers. These are big, big numbers. And major cities, military, what type of money is going towards the military? They're ready. They're ready, guys. They're ready. Trust me. And they're watching.
Yeah. I last time I was in China was in 2017, and I went to Shanghai. And of course, I've been to many places in the world, and I've seen, big cities, industrialists, and because I mixed with quite a few people there. And I have to say that the sheer scale of China was something that I have never encountered before. I've never seen an industrial and economic machine on that scale. And whatever economic problems it has, and it no doubt has its economic problems, I think that is something that people do need to understand. Now, when you say that they're watching these events in Russia and Ukraine very, very carefully, and that they're studying them, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're saying to themselves, if Russia fails, we're next, the US will come after us? Or does it mean the Russians aren't doing as well as they should be, so maybe we don't really need them as allies anymore or friends anymore? Or does it mean something completely different?
Once again, very good question. They target it as this. China is about relationships. And they will continue to bang on about the 12th of February, 2015. They will go on and on and on about this, saying, wait a moment, you had an agreement in place, Russia. You had an agreement in place, Ukraine. You had an agreement in place, Mr. Hollande, the Chancellor of Germany. You had the Minsk agreement in place. Why didn't you honor it? And these diplomatic channels that China uses and goes down, when they get broken or when other countries break their promises, they watch that and they see the behavior. And it's very interesting how China, plays the long game. They can wait this one out. It might drive the US crazy. I'll just give you an example. The Hudson Institute recently hired Mr. Pompeo as of a few weeks ago, who has gone on a megaphone on the internet and basically says that all arrows point to China for all the atrocities and all the bad things happening in the world. Well, once again, I'm going to try to be as clear as I can here. I've been invited into this country and I've been given unlimited access to pretty much anywhere I want to go and anything that I want to see by the media companies that I do collaborations here. Now, I could simply ask, I want to travel to this zone and see this certain thing. They would take me to that place. They would allow me to see that. Now, the difference between myself is I'm a Westerner, I'm a Canadian in China here, but some of the international media firms like the BBC, they've lost credibility here. So China knows and understands that, sure, you want to be in the country, you can still report in the country, but if you're reporting absolute BS or fake news, as we call it, then sit in your office in Beijing, report what you want to report, we'll let you get on with it. But when my phone call rings and they say, Alex, where do you want to go? Well, I want to go to this city. I heard about that story. I want you guys to get me access. I get that. And that is my dedication here over the next 2 to 3 years here is I think there's going to be a lot of attention moved forward as the military industrial complex focuses their arrows on the big one, and that's China for sure.
I mean, if we're talking about a military-industrial complex, one of the most interesting stories about the Ukraine war, in my experience, my opinion, actually, because I mean, I've said many times, I'm not a military person. I've never been interested in military affairs in my life. This has not been my thing, but I have backgrounds in industry and logistics and those sort of things. Is that the military-industrial complex, the mighty military-industrial complex in the United States, doesn't actually make an awful lot. I find that most astonishing, actually. I mean, they're taking on Russia, and they can't keep up with the Russians in artillery production, or rockets, or missiles, or things like that. Now, that's Russia, and I've been to Russia. I mean, I know Russia well. I've been many places in Russia. It's impressive. It's big. It's not China. You think that I'm struggling to keep up with the Russians, then trying to keep up with what China can produce. I mean, don't even think about it. They would overwhelm you. I mean, they could probably produce more in a day than you could in a year if they're having all this trouble. I mean, that's certainly my feeling. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Once again, when we hear the collective West, somebody told me somebody told me about the show today. They said, you're going on with the collective best on the show today. So it was quite funny comment. But when it comes to, the military budgets here, the budgets here aren't inflated. Okay. And there's a comparison. There was a report out about 18 months ago comparing, the cost of a hammer with the U.S. military, $80. The cost of a hammer in the China, $6. And they were comparing the budgets. They were also saying that, the Chinese have not had to use their hardware, or they haven't left multi-billions of dollars of their hardware in other countries that they've either failed at regime change or failed at their mission. And the Chinese continue to expand. Now, we'll also have that theory of, well, the Chinese don't have experience in wars. I'm going to be very clear again. If the Americans or NATO want to try to bring their ships across the Pacific Ocean and park them in the South China Sea and defend themselves in the middle of water against a nation of China, here's the difference. That outside that window there is China. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that anything that makes running shoes, race cars, or washing machines can immediately overnight be turned into a military, a plant, just like that. And that is because if people feel that this nation is under threat, watch 1.5 million people get motivated real quick. But they're not like that here. No one is concerned about the Americans coming to their territory. It's just that people are getting a little bit annoyed that, they're ruining other people's lives all across, the United States, Canada, UK, and Europe. That's their biggest concern. They actually generally care for the persons that are just getting absolutely outpriced when it comes to the electricity bills.
I have to say this. When I went to China,
it looks like we lost.
It does.
Patrick, just to let everyone know, Patrick is in a war zone, and as you saw, he was broadcasting from his car.
Absolutely.
So
if we get him back,
we'll get him.
If we don't, well, he gave us some wonderful insights. So it's we're grateful. We're just grateful to have him at all, actually. And I mean, the work he does is just, I mean, astonishing, and I'd say heroic, actually. I mean, heroic journalism as it should be done from a war zone. That's all I will say. And as I said, hopefully we will get him back. But if I could just return to what we were saying. I remember when I went to China in 2017, I was in Shanghai. I went to Nanjing as well. I went to Suzhou, which is, of course, a tourist place, but whatever. But a thing that struck me, first of all, is I've never seen such a level of self-confidence on the part of the population. And this is, again, I think something that people don't perhaps quite understand. It reminded me of Americans, once upon a time, as I remember, the tremendous self-confidence that the United States has. You don't find that anywhere. I've never seen that anywhere else now. I found it in China. And the enormous pride, which is something people, again, I think, underestimate, the enormous pride Chinese people have in China's achievements over the last 50, perhaps even longer years. And again, that is not to be underestimated. In 1941, America also had not had a huge amount of experience of wars, but it had that huge industrial machine behind it. It had that tremendous self-confidence. I feel that this time it's the Chinese who have it. And I don't know whether your feelings, whether you would echo that feelings, those feelings, Alex.
Being here in this country, I've been traveling back and forth to China since 2002. And I moved here for one reason, to get the story out on this country that is really not what you see in the media. If you're watching the Western media, they're basically saying US versus China, China versus US. That's such an easy play. The Chinese generally do care about the world economy. They shop in just about every American store that you can imagine. Whether it's Starbucks, they're buying Nike shoes, they're supporting the US economy, they're buying Teslas, they're consumers. This is a very capitalistic country, even though you, of course, think that it's dark days here with a gray lens from a BBC reporter. That's how you would feel about it. But there are certain things that are quite different from the Chinese and Americans. The Chinese actually don't really follow politics here. Politics in their country, they kind of say, you know what, let's leave it to the guys upstairs to worry about, the multi-billion-dollar projects. And each city has its own pride, because almost, China's got over 661 cities. Over 220 of them have over 1 million. And I think it's over 60 of them have staggering numbers. I mean, the city of Chongqing I live in is almost the population of Canada. The 8th largest economy is the port container in Shanghai, not the city, but the 8th largest economy in the world is just a container port. And you're right about your perception about China. They have this, sense of pride to them. And they're proud of what they've come through. They got a long way to go here. This place is not perfect. It has a long way to go. It still has a long way to develop. And being here as a Westerner during this time, during this pandemic time, I can tell you this country is getting ready to open. It's exciting. And the Chinese say the world's not open until we're open. And once our 1.5 million consumers can go out and use all that saved money we have for 3 years in these countries, we'll be ready to go. But then again, they do follow the Russia-Ukraine. Really, it's all over our social networks here. Just so your audience, if they don't know about the social networks here in China, they're massive. Yes, they can criticize the government here. There's very little censorship when it comes to, being critical of the government. They can get all the stories. They actually, the platforms here, we see more stories of Russia than we see on the Western media platforms than YouTube. So you might say, well, YouTube is blocked in China. Well, the Chinese, they don't really care. They have Bilibili, they have Sihua, they have Douyin, they have all their own social networking platforms that are in the multi-billions of watchers. But one thing that they have paid a lot of attention to is the Russia-Ukraine story. And I'm going to be, very honest here. Most of them do support what Russia is doing. And Vladimir Putin is very well respected in China, for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Is this amongst ordinary people, or is this the political class?
once this is like you could sit down in a cafe and introduce yourself to someone, and they would just say, "Hey, what country are you from?" If you're from Europe, how is the Russia? They will easily tag it to, either a nationality. If you're with some Europeans, they have no problems talking about politics. But I think it is widespread through everyone, and they educate themselves on this matter. They're not easily led into a story that might be told by a Western media. They can go on BBC here. They can access CNN here. But they know very clearly that if they're going to get some of their information, they watch shows like you. I've actually seen some of your guys' shows uploaded to some of the Chinese social networks over here. Yeah, you guys are already on, so you got some followers over here.
That's nice to know.
And
gosh, what about other countries? Carry on. I didn't want to interrupt.
Just so everyone knows, I'm a good friend with Patrick. And as you know, Patrick was one of the first channels ever demonetized on YouTube. We talked about this many, many years ago. And following that, he was then taken off, I believe it was PayPal and all the other channels that he can get support from. What we've been doing here over the last 6 months is putting a lot of his content on the China social networks here without any censorship. They're showing his content here. And that, to all those content creators out there in the world that feel that their voices are being crushed by, YouTube, or being crushed by people that don't believe in us, you would never think that a Canadian would tell you that the Chinese platforms will let you tell your message. And you might say, well, it's only in China. Well, it's to 1.5 billion people. And I think that's important.
We have such a completely different conception of China from what you've just described in the West. I mean, and I have to say, one of the most interesting things is the way in which hostility to China in the West, when I say the West, I mean Britain and the United States, because those are the places I know, but I think this is a general trend now, has just cranked up suddenly to extraordinary levels. It sort of began midway through the Trump administration, but it's actually got worse, in my opinion, with the current administration, and it's clearly a long-term trend. I mean, and one of the things you mentioned that China has a lot of developing to do, but when I was in Shanghai, Nanjing, obviously, richer areas of China, I was impressed at how developed it actually already is, which is perhaps something which many people in the West don't imagine, don't understand. I mean, it does not feel like a global, like a third world place at all. If that's what your idea of China is like, then forget it. That's not what it's like. But anyway, do the Chinese know about this sudden shift in Western attitudes towards them?
Sure. And they're very familiar with the $300 million budget that's been passed by the Americans to fund anti-China rhetoric. That's a fact. That's not me making up that number. Anyone that's watching the show today can Google it. They can see that the U.S. government has approved in Congress. The checks have been written. You will see a lot of NGO non-government organizations do major hit pieces on China. There's major channels. All you got to do is watch YouTube. You can even see China's ending in 28 days. China's ending in 15 days. A lot of these channels are funded by this $300 million annual package by the U.S. government. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that the McKinsey Institute, I'm not sure if you're aware of this consulting firm in the United States of America, they're really starting to ramp up. Okay, well, maybe I'll just.
No. Please say what you want. Say what you want to be absolutely free. Come on. Anyway,
those documents are very well distributed here in China, and they're very well read because a lot of the stuff that are in those papers eventually is either a roadmap to what the administration is doing or partial part of a puzzle that the administration is doing in the US. They're watching. I mean, can we blame them? I mean, there's other intelligence agencies around the world. China is using its resources to make sure that it can keep stability in its country. I mean, we will get a lot of, you know, as you say, a lot of people have this stereotype of what China is. Now, a lot of people don't want a Westerner like me to say, hey, things are progressing here. These cities are spectacular. They look amazing. They don't want to hear it. Even if I'm standing in the middle of a beautiful city with amazing infrastructure, bullet trains for the, you know, throughout the entire country, they don't want to hear, or they, and maybe that could be that they're upset with their own government. We've been called everything from shills to tankies to CPC supporters. I've got it all. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of it. So
we know all about that. You mentioned problems, and you know that it's got problems. What are the problems? I mean, when I was there in 2017, people were still talking a lot about pollution. By the way, air pollution seemed to be an issue. I've heard that it's got better, and it was apparently already better in 2017 from what it had been before. But what are the problems? What are people talking about? What is the thing that the Chinese person in the street worries about at the moment?
You know, once again, you know, and I admire the questions that you're asking me, but I have good answers for these. And the answers are the government's spending a lot of money on the, you know, they admit that they made mistakes. They admit that the, you know, they had gray skies for many years in the 90s and the early 2000s. But if anyone watches some of my videos, I'm in a city of 32 million, which was in a major industrial city in southwest China here along the Yangtze River. Chongqing was a massive polluting city. Now, the city has over 326 days a year out of 365 of clean air. You can see blue skies. You know, you can see, Alexander, you've seen them in Shanghai. I mean, the challenges that China is trying to move forward is they are trying with their poverty alleviation, and I want to be clear on that word. Poverty doesn't mean homeless in China. Okay, the word homeless they don't understand in China, because even in cities like Chongqing, a city of 30-some million, you don't see any homeless people. The poverty alleviation is where the country feels that they need to succeed at. They need to try to get another 300 to 400 million people above a certain level and to achieve what they want to achieve. And they will continue to strive to do that, connecting other parts of the country, because outside, if you go towards the western part of the country, that's where you start to see a lot of the poverty happen. And they take it personal. They take it personal.
Is it just a question? I mean, when you say the western regions, I mean, Chongqing, from what I remember, is fairly to the west. Is it not? Is it not?
It's southwest China, but as we get into the Xinjiang area, you know, which is very controversial. Okay, extremely controversial when it comes to America. They tried to pretty much wipe out the cotton industry there last year, and then they went on to solar panels, didn't succeed with that as well. But those areas there, you know, a lot of ethnics going in this country, and it's a big country to manage. Imagine that, trying to manage 1.5 billion people, and with so many different cultures, ethnics around the country, and they're doing their best. You know, green-wise, they're doing their best. EV, electric vehicles in this country are, you know, it works. It might not work in other countries around the world. I'm not a big environmental guy or anything like that, or an activist, but I can tell you that most of the cars on the roads here, you're giving great incentives. But if I'm going to, you know, hit the nail on the head when it comes to China and Russia, is you can see that China is the type of country that will rally behind a country that they honestly feel is getting, you know, the bad end of the stick here. And you can see by that recent meeting by President Xi that went up to Kazakhstan, that was all over the front pages of China. That was everywhere. That was talked about. And you'll see people walking around with shirts saying they support Russia here. That happens here. They love Russia. They understand it. And it's amazing that when you're talking to the average Chinese person, they know the regions. They know the regions and the details on how Ukraine is broken up, what happened. They understand about the Minsk agreement that wasn't honored. They get it, and it's very clear.
Yeah, I have to say that was the other thing that struck me. It is a very educated society, a fact again which perhaps people underestimate in the West, but it is a very educated society indeed. What about the housing bubble? I mean, we hear all about this all the time in the West. It's been talked about hugely that there's been massive overbuilding, that there's massive lending, there's problems with companies which are loaded down with debt. I mean, what are your feelings about that?
Of course, we've seen reports about that. Yes, I think that's very real, that there is overbuilding, but the government has ways to deal with that and to deal with companies that have maybe become very lavish on their acquisition phase. Now, can this country write a check for 50 billion? Sure. Can it write a check for 100 billion? It certainly can. All it's got to do is cash in a few trillion of its treasuries from the United States, and the problem is quickly solved. But it's the mentality of the Chinese people here. They buy houses. Sometimes they buy houses and they don't move into them for 10 or 15 years. It's pride of ownership here. I don't know too many people that are in jobs in China that are either in the process of purchasing a house or have purchased one or two houses. That's just how it is here. Will they throw away money upgrading cars every 3 to 5 years, losing money in depreciation of cars? No. Instead of losing that money, they would put it into a property and take a loan out. Are you going to have failures in the real estate business here and agents go under, developers go under? Absolutely, that will happen. But an all-out, full-on collapse of the entire real estate market to take down this economy, I know a lot in the West would like to see that, but that's wishful thinking. That's not going to happen.
I agree. I think it's the wish. The wish is the father to the thought. Again, I think you have to spend some time in China to understand that actually, that whatever the problems there, I mean, the sheer scale of the economy means it can absorb them. And I think people in the West just perhaps don't quite grasp that, because again, they don't quite grasp China's scale. I'm going to finish and then hand over quickly to Alex. But I just wanted to ask one final question, which is, of course, there's the always, I mean, the Kremlinology has never been my thing much. But I'm going to ask where you're the Chinese equivalent anyway. I mean, some talk that there's going to be big personnel changes coming out of this Congress. All the indications are Xi Jinping is absolutely going to be there. I don't have any doubt about that. But anybody who you think might be a rising star or a falling star, or is there really not something that we ought to be too bothered about, because the Chinese government is going to be continuing pretty much as it has? I mean, any thoughts about this?
I don't think we should expect any surprises in regards to leadership or leadership change. That I feel that the country is very confident. The pressure is going to come from what is the next step moving forward. You have to understand that this country has had incredible amount of patience. I know a lot of the viewers might think I'm a mouthpiece for the CPC, but I'm giving my experience here as a Canadian here in China. I've come here on my own will, and I've analyzed things the way that any Westerner would in this country, with a grain of salt. And I can tell you that there is no concerns about the 16th, and that means from above. Where everyone's paying attention to is, when is this country going to open up? And that really affects a lot of the municipalities. not from the central government level, but from the municipality level. A lot of these companies really need to get out there and start building these international relationships again. The travel has to get moving again. When you see massive places like the Canton Fair canceled, for 2 or 3 years in a row, these are big, big events. And, for most of the world out there, they might say, well, China's closed, no big deal. It is a big deal. Just ask neighboring Thailand that used to get 57% of its tourists from China. Think about all the relationships and the trade that goes on with America and China. You can only sell so much over virtual conferences. And that's where a lot of the focus, and I think a lot of the pressure is going to be, Alexander, is this guy, Xi, has got to come up with a very, very detailed game plan on opening this country. And that is where it's really, there's going to be a lot of focus on that. And all eyes are on that. I would say just about the entire country is looking for that one answer.
Alex, outstanding. Now, the other Alex, do you want to add things, questions?
Yeah. What's the situation with Taiwan right now?
Good question. So, as I'm going to try to answer this in the best way possible. And I knew this question was going to come up on the program. So there has to be an understanding from the international community that the relationship between Taiwan and China is very good. What people want to try to, I guess, initiate is a conflict. Now, I'm going to be very clear. Someone brought me up and they compared the situation with Russia and the Ukraine. They said, well, how is there a difference? Well, first of all, the country is still allowing military hardware, for example, to be delivered in Taiwan. It gets sold there from the Americans every year. That's still being allowed. Do the Chinese like it? Probably not. Do they show their displeasure? Yes. Is there major sanctions going on between, Taiwan and China? No. But there is an understanding that I think when push comes to shove, no matter how hard the Western governments try to cause some conflicts between the mainland and Taiwan, I'm sorry, but you're going to be disappointed. It's just not going to happen. They will try. These major consulting firms, these paid people like, I would give you an example. Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo, it's his major dream to see conflict between China and Taiwan. It's not happening. These are the brothers and sisters of China, and you have to live here to really understand what that means. I don't think anything is going to happen from that. If there's talk about it, it's all hot air, or it's trying to, invoke maybe, I'm just going to say that it's just not going to happen. No matter how many warmongers in the United States want it to happen, it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One final question. A lot of people,
sure.
They ask about China and Russia and if their relationship is really that good. And sometimes you go back into history and you say that, and you hear that China may have claims on certain Russian territory, and there are some things that have not been resolved, and there shouldn't be this trust between both countries. What do you think about that?
Well, these are two majorly important countries in today's day and age. China knows that what Russia has, China needs. Russia is long what China needs, truly. Whether it's in lumber, whether it's in oil and gas, renewables, Russia has it all. I mean, they share borders together. Maps have been rewritten for years. If you go back in history, you go back 100 years, the map looked different. You go back 50 years, the map looked different. There's always going to be skirmishes on territorial parts of countries, no matter what. There's never going to be one day where everybody stops and says, that's our territory, that's our territory. But as China tries to play the diplomatic channel again here, I think it speaks volumes that China hasn't gone out and said, okay, we are supporting this 100% or we are supporting that. I think that economically right now is the most important thing that Russia is concerned about. That's just my opinion. Of course, there's going to be many other opinions there. And China can write them checks. They're not connected to, China doesn't need to go through the SWIFT banking system to send money to Russia. In fact, there are many branches of the Bank of China and the ICBC Bank opening up in Russia. Even to go further, let's talk about the visa restrictions that used to be in place between these nations. Those are both being relaxed as we speak. So I think when the dust settles, boy, oh boy, what a great set of neighbors you have. You have 140 million people that are not respected to travel into Europe, that will be discriminated if they travel into Europe. Russians, they won't be invited no matter how great of a nation of people they are. Well, I think they're going to be traveling to China. And that might sound strange, but imagine that, a country that openly invites them to come into their country and doesn't profile them for geopolitical reasons. I think that's a wonderful choice. And that's why I think that relation, China knows how to play the diplomatic game properly. And that's why they're winning. They're winning other ways, not just on territory and stuff like that. Yeah.
Alexander, do you have something
No,
to say?
can I just say,
Or-
I just wanted one very quick word of things about this, because I actually wrote long ago a piece about Chinese-Russian relations. And of course, what people always do when they talk about this historic hostility between China and Russia, they focus it on one specific period, which is the period of the Sino-Soviet split of the 1960s and early 1970s. Now, what most people don't know is that China and Russia were Russia was the first European power with which China opened diplomatic relations. And that happened in the late 17th century, where under the time of Peter the Great and the Kangxi Emperor, there were constant contacts. There were diplomats going backwards and forwards between St. Petersburg and Beijing, right through the 18th century, right through the 19th century. Most of the time, relations were very good. That's when the Russians learned to drink Chinese tea, for example. It used to come to Russia from China during that period. Now, there were rockier periods, but again, in the 1920s, 1930s, China and Russia had very good relations. Again, people don't know this. And of course, they were very close during the 50s as well. You mustn't just assume that a period of about 15 years when relations were very tense is actually symptomatic of this relationship. Given how big these two countries are and how long their border is, the reality, on the contrary, is that they overall, over that entire period, managed their relations very well. I just wanted to say that because, as I said, we get a completely false picture here of the totality of the history.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Alex. You can.
Yeah, I knew coming on the show today that China would be obviously a part of the live stream today, and I can understand that some of the Western audience is just not going to understand or accept the words that I'm saying in regards to China. I totally understand how the perception of China is in the Western countries. I understand that. I think that China does not a very good job on actually disseminating the good that the country does, or actually in defending itself, especially into the Western media platforms. But they're a country that they don't want to go to war. But if pushed into it, they will. This is a country that hasn't, I'm going to be a little bit general here, but hasn't really been in a conflict since 1979 with, using its military hardware on foreign soil. They're a country that doesn't have 800 international military bases like the United States. They have one in Africa, and that's to defend, I think, a major investment there. They are the scapegoat, the blame game country. They know it. They know that a lot of the nations around the world don't like them, either, whether it's saying that, okay, well, China's now taking over the South China Sea, or China's indebting a lot of countries. I get that and I understand that, but if you watch over the decades what this country does and what it does for investment, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm just, and Alexander, you've been here, you know what it's like. Outside that window there is absolute miracles happening. I mean, there's a city called Chengdu, which was just in a recent lockdown. Now, to the average person, they would think, okay, people are getting bolted into their doors. I mean, it's very easy to kind of resketch something like that for television. It's a country that actually cares about its citizens. It has a contact tracing app that works. Sorry, guys, hate to admit it, but it does work. If you travel to other provinces, you need to get an NAT test. It takes 20 seconds. It's free. Okay, now that may be a burden to some people that don't want to share their data. I understand that. But Chinese are different. They're okay with that. They're okay with having the possibility of getting on 110 bullet trains to the next city that go 300 kilometers an hour. They're happy with 45 new airports that have opened in the country in the last 4 months. They're happy with that. They're happy with their annual monthly cost of earnings going up for 15 consecutive years. They're happy with their low crime rate. It's just a different country with different values and a different way forward. Has their government spilled multi-trillions of dollars in wars? No. But are they investing in military hardware? Oh, yeah, you can bet they are. And when I use that word, they're ready, that doesn't mean they're going to move forward and instigate something. But if something lands on 1 inch of soil here, they'll protect it.
All right, so we're a little over an hour. Let me just throw one more question at you, Alex.
Please do.
Real quick. Is there a chance that the collective West, the United States, could peel China away from Russia with regards to this conflict in Ukraine? And can you perhaps comment a bit about China and India as well, and their relations, both being in the BRICS, but also being a little bit confrontational as well?
The first one, will they be able to, I'll use the word divide. That might be a little bit more clear. Not going to happen. No, there is, I feel that the foot pedal has been pushed to the floor. China understands who its allies are now moving forward. Russia is it's everywhere here. You feel it here. You can feel it, that there is momentum rallying behind the country that needs support. You feel it. It's in the papers here. I don't know if you guys follow many of the Chinese newspapers here, but it's in the newspapers here. It's in the local media here. It's even in the provincial media outlets, and of course some of the other outlets that get on the Western media platforms like CGTN, CCTV. Those platforms. These are Chinese platforms, but geared towards kind of like an RT channel. But they are very, I don't want to use the word pro, they're very understanding that Russia is an integral part of China moving forward. Absolutely, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. That is definitely. When it comes to India, unfortunately, that is not something that I have been able to do for investigations. That's something that we have heard in circles talked about. From a level of importance here, I think China needs to resolve these issues, especially having a neighbor 1.3 billion next door to it. I think that those relations, I hope, will become better as China gears up to open up. And I just want to say to you, gentlemen, I really appreciate you giving Patrick and me the opportunity to come on the program today. I watch your work. I think what you guys are doing is exceptional work. I know the work that Patrick's doing. I've met Patrick on many occasions. We did travel to Transnistria a few times during, even before the conflict. He understands all my stories. My father was in the Navy. My grandfather was in the Canadian Navy. Patrick, I don't know if you know, he served in the Navy in the US. We have a lot of good stories to tell, but I just think that the work that you guys are doing is extremely, extremely important. And I commend you, as well as a content creator on here, that please keep going as much as you guys can, because it is so important. It's so important, the work that you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. Well, we're very moved to hear that. You almost make me blush, actually, when I hear things like that. So,
definitely. Thank you, Alex, as well. Alex. Thank you very much, Alex, for that as well. Thank you very much for, just so everyone knows, Alex, you played a huge role in organizing this live stream with yourself and with Patrick. I thank you very much. Alexander thanks you very much. And I know all our viewers thank you very much, because given Patrick's circumstances, it's very hard to get him on, especially a live show. A live show is tough because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of unexpected things that could happen. But thank you very much, Alex. Do you guys have any final thoughts or comments, Alex or Alexander?
I have a question for you guys, if you don't mind. Spending some time in Transnistria, the unrecognized country, which might be part of Russia soon. Do you guys think that Transnistria is going to eventually be part of the big picture here? Do you think that the Russians are looking at using that whole corridor connecting Odessa to Transnistria? Because being in that region, I've visited Transnistria 4 times. The last time Patrick and I were there, we were given a 5-day pass into the country, and we were actually interviewing government heads down there. And that's an extraordinary piece of land, an extremely important one that I don't think the European Union is really paying much attention to, but they should. What are your guys' thoughts on that area? Just out of curiosity.
I was straightforwardly, I think the answer is yes. Of course, it depends a lot on military, political developments. But I'm going to say something else. You don't call up 300,000 men unless you have a big plan for Ukraine. You don't build up armed forces to the extent that the Russians are now doing. And I think it is inconceivable that Transnistria will not feature ultimately in this. I know that the British in particular are terrified that the Russians will eventually move past Kherson to Odessa. If they move to Odessa, Transnistria is just next door. And I'm quite convinced that eventually the Russians will act about Odessa. I can't imagine that they won't, given how important a city it is. I can't imagine either that won't involve Transnistria as well. I don't know what you think, Alex.
I agree with you, Alexander, but this has been for me, it's been a very strange conflict, the way it's developed over the past 7 months. It's been very difficult to read. And Putin is an extremely difficult leader to get a read for as well. So
I think if Transnistria connect, which I really feel that they will, being in that territory, they want so badly to be part of Russia. They have their own passports that are ready to go. The currency's pegged to the ruble. They must be very happy right now with that. A lot of the industrial part of the break of Moldova is there. And you have to understand the history of Moldova in the last decade. This is a country that's actually been robbed, billions of dollars in actually savings accounts from some of the people in the country. There's a massive scandal going on when Patrick and I arrived there the year before that over $1 billion vanished from its banking system within the politicians. I will send you guys that story. Now, there's a lot of broken trust, and I think that if Transnistria goes, Moldova goes too. Moldova will follow suit, and then you have Russia right on the doorstep of Romania, and look out. Yeah.
But this is a point which Alex makes. He's absolutely right. It is the man in the Kremlin and the people around him that ultimately hold the key to all of this. If they were to act, if they were to decide to do it, this is a clear decision to go that way, which of course it may already be. I mean, then, as I said, it must logically lead to that point. But as Alex said, Putin has played this whole war in a most intricate and complex way. It's opened him up to criticisms, by the way, in Russia itself, from all sorts of people. A lot of people find his actions difficult to understand. I'm not going to pretend I found them easy to understand, because I don't. But we'll just have to see. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But as I said, I come back to what I said. I can't imagine that you call up 300,000 men without a plan. 300,000 men looks more to me than you would need simply to defend what you've got. It would surely involve something more ambitious than just that.
I agree, and the other thing that I find hard to believe, I can't imagine countries like China and India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. I can't imagine them risking so much to alienate their traditional partners to go on this path with Putin and with Russia that they are taking the world towards. It's a path led by China and Russia, but I just can't imagine all of these leaders to jeopardize so much of what is an existing world structure to follow these countries towards this new thing that they're building, without there being some sort of big plan, not only for Europe but the world. So it's hard to read, but if you take a step back and just think about it, there has to be something bigger at play. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. It's very easy when I'm sure Patrick will tell you this too. When you're covering the Ukraine war, it's very easy, because of course the human tragedies also involved. To get immersed in the fact that one town has been captured, 17 villages have been taken, that kind of thing, and then of course that can be very emotional, but it might not actually tell you very much about the sort of bigger things that are happening. And one day historians are going to have lots to write about this, because clearly the discussions and the debates that have been going on behind the scenes in the Kremlin, in Zhongnanhai, in all these places around all of this affair have probably been extraordinarily interesting and very complicated.
Extremely. And I think that what, Patrick Lancaster has done, can you imagine this, guys, for a second? Imagine there was no Patrick Lancaster in the Donetsk People's Republic, archiving video since 2014. Imagine there's no video, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
It would be incredibly hard to defend that position. But now what he has done, and for people that haven't or even viewed his videos, you are seeing the most archived potential video that could be used in a war crime tribunal in the future. When this gets to, past its level, war is over, the investigations start, all Patrick Lancaster has to do is says, here's 9 years, get to work, guys. And I think that would be a great leveler on this Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad, and only Russia bad, to now you have 8 or 9 years of archive stuff. This guy puts his life on the line. And, Patrick takes his fair amount of shots. We've had many conversations. I talked to him about, the being in China as a Westerner is not really a popular thing. And a lot of people don't like to hear my reporting come out of here because maybe they're just not ready for the truth sometimes. But it is what it is. I report it with my camera. I report these cities. In the next couple of weeks, I'll be joining a police force in the largest city here in China. Unlimited, let the camera roll. They're going to let me drive around with them. I'll put it up on YouTube. Now people will say, well, maybe it looks staged, or, Patrick went through that. I remember being an early subscriber to him at around 6,000. He had 6,000 subscribers. And I said to my wife, who's Lithuanian, and I said, this guy's work is extraordinary. You're not going to believe this. And she watched 2 of his videos. She says, book a ticket, get on an airplane. And while you're at it, take the guy some new camera equipment. He's going to need it down there. I went down there. I met Patrick in Chisinau, Moldova at the start. We met, he was flying in from Donetsk. Of course, he couldn't go through Kiev at the time. And he's an incredibly humble guy, married to a local girl, has 2 children in there. The guy just puts it up on the internet. Here it is. He's saying, watch this side, watch that side. And he just uploads it. And at the time, I mean, YouTube shut him off. He was living on breadcrumbs for quite a few years. And I'm glad that he's getting the recognition. And today, before he came on the show, and not a word of lie here, guys, he has always wanted to appear on your show. It has taken a couple of months to get it together today. I was even nervous. I was sending Alex, the other Alex here, messages saying, oh, I'm getting a bit worried here. I don't know if he's going to show up. He leaves it right to the last minute. But, he's an incredibly humble guy. And I'm really happy that you've given him your platform today. I know he'll be watching this later.
And we would love to have him on our platform again, as we would love to have you. And about Patrick, well, I don't know him, but I endorse everything you say about his reporting. It has been astonishing, as you absolutely rightly say, as somebody who's been involved in trials. It is a magnificent catalogue of evidence what he has provided, and it's also heroic journalism, and I don't use that word lightly.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alex.
No, I just want to, thank you guys again, for this opportunity to bring him on the program. He's great in front of the camera, live streams. He's a bit nervous as well. Both of us sometimes get nervous. We don't know what to say. I mean, you guys know definitely. You guys are you're inspirational. So I just want to say that again. Thank you so much, and I commend you guys again for the work that you do.
Thank you. Live streams are definitely tough, and definitely a big thank you to Patrick as well, because it's got to be doubly, triply, quadruply tough to get on a live stream given the circumstances that he is in. So thank you to Patrick. Thank you once again, Alex, Reportify Media, everybody. Those links to Patrick and Alex's channels are in the description box down below. When we wrap this live stream up, I'm going to put those links as a pinned comment as well. Please subscribe to both of those channels. Follow their work. Alex, thank you once again very, very much for setting all of this up. And thank you for finally making this happen to get us all together. And let's do this again.
Absolutely.
Let's do this again. Let's get all 4 of us together. Let's get the 3 of us together. Let's get Patrick back on, and let's do this again. And hopefully let's do this under better circumstances as well.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Doing this under more peaceful circumstances. Thank you very much, everybody who watched us on Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and the Duran.locals.com. Thank you very much to our moderators. Alan Watson is in the house. Spartan Warrior Queen is with us as well. And who else was helping us moderate? I think it was just Alan and SWQ, Spartan Warrior Queen, and myself as well. I helped out a bit. Thank you to Alex once again, coming to us from China. Thank you to Patrick Lancaster and Alexander. Final words from you before we sign off.
Final words. No, this has been a wonderful program. And again, thank you, Alex, for making it possible, making it happen. And let's definitely all get together. And I'm sure that we will be in for better times soon. And that'll be good to meet then. But, you know, we've got to keep plugging on. And thank you also for all your kind words, all the kind words you said about us. And we are very grateful for them. And for your appearing on our program.
Yes, and we will be, and we will have a dedicated program to answer all the questions and comments that came in as well. So 1 second, let me just put one more comment on here, and we will wrap it up. Take care, everybody.